Walking alone is a way to ease your mind, but what would you do about the shadows that lurk behind? Don't be afraid of the dark, for this is Tales from Around the Campfire. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to day, what is this, number 7? Day number 7, episode 7, uh, video number 7. I don't know what you're trying to, what you want to call it, but yes, welcome back to Tales from Around the Campfire. Yes, episode 7. All right, guys. Hopefully, you guys are having a really great day today. Listen. Well, actually, first of all, let me just start, but just saying off by saying, English, please don't go away from me today. And also, the little intro you guys hear, you know, just come and the outro, of course, because I started off with the After Dark podcast saying an intro and an outro for y'all, and of course, moving it on to video form, I do enjoy doing this. I mean, it does take time for me to think about like to what to what to write, but eventually it comes out to be like that. So also I want to tell you guys that the intro and outro will change for every season, and for every special that I make. So. But yeah, so yesterday we were reading stories, ghost stories from the website called thoughtcatalog.com. Yes, and we did read 19 of them because one of the stories we've already read before, and I don't want to reread things. You know what I mean? So we skipped number 19, I believe, and we went straight to number 20. So, but yeah, so without further ado, we're gonna see if we can read 10 straight. Take a little break, intermission, and then 10 straight again to finish off the episode. Right. So, the first story. Oh, actually, by the way, we are still going to be reading from the Thought Catalog because there are 100 stories here that they should be good. But yes, here we go. The first story is called "I Saw an Old Ghost in a Wheelchair." During Hurricane Gustav in '08, I think, I evacuated to a church in Baton Rouge with a friend and his family. At the same time, there was an entire nursing home worth of old people staying in the church. My friend, his family, and myself all shared one room together. In this church, there was one bathroom that was large, similar to something that would be in an elementary school, a few stalls and a thorough urinal, etc. One night during the storm, my friend and I made a trip to the bathroom. The lights had since gone out, middle of the hurricane and all. The church had a musty, eerie feel to it, kind of like when you turn out the AC in your house for a few days. The area surrounding the church was also dead quiet, since there was no electricity in the area. The bathroom was several halls over from our room, so we grabbed our flashlights and set out. While walking down a long hall, we shined our flashlights ahead, and there, at the end of the hall, sat an old man in a wheelchair, in the middle of the night, with no one around. Now, this hall is incredibly long, so we could make him out, but we couldn't really see all his facial features, etc. Once we grasped what we saw, we turned and looked at each other, semi freaked out. Then we shined our flashlight back to where he was, and there was nothing there. It was as if he vanished. No sign, no sound, nothing. Needless to say, we hauled ass back to the room. I heard a phantom footstep. I heard phantom footsteps running towards me. Okay, this happened to me when I was in junior high school. It was December, and it had to start snowing that evening. My best friend and I were in debate and getting ready for our state qualifiers that were the next day. We were writing our uh, cases, and as usual, at each other's throats over the details of the cases. It was stressful, tense evening. We finally finished our cases at about 3 a.m. when we went to my room for the night. Almost as soon as we got into my room, we heard that what sounded like water turning on in another end of the house. No big deal. Probably my parents, I think. Then We heard from the front door open. I told her, I bet mom woke up and wanted some fresh air. That made sense. I really thought that's what it was until we heard incredibly heavy footsteps in my living room, headed towards my room. There were there was not anyone in my family's footsteps. Then they stopped. My friend and I looked at each other and were freaked out, just standing frozen in my room. We walked closer to each other and the footsteps started again. But this time they were running towards us. We both flipped. We grabbed each other's hands out of fear, and my bedroom door flew open. We both looked at the door. Nobody was there. We ran to the bathroom that's connected to my room. I closed, locked the door, and stood against it. When we finally had the balls to do it, we sprinted to my parents' room, crying hysterically. We obviously startled my parents awake. They said neither of them had gotten up. My dad grabbed his gun and looked outside. No tracks in the snow or anywhere around the house. She had marked crossed across her neck. My brother once lived in a flat in downtown Mount Clemens, Michigan, I think. The Clem was known to be a hotspot for baths back in the Depression era and was booming with activity nowadays. It has some rundown parts. This is where my brother rented his flat. It was a giant old raggedy house, which was now spread into multiple old apartments. Anyway, long story short, he admitted to odd experience, cupboard doors opening, things missing. But one particular oddity was that he was always missing boxers, underwear from his drawer. He admitted that he thought that the house was haunted and the ghost had a crush on him. Never thought violent or disturbing, just odd things. Later, he started dating his future ex-wife. She started coming and noticing the oddities began to increase. New oddities began occurring. His girlfriend would always find her which were left on a mat inside the apartment, outside the door on the patio in the morning. She'd always comment to my brother to stop putting her shoes outside. He had an idea of why, but didn't want to frighten her. Besides, it wasn't hurting anyone, right? Well, things started to get worse. He comes home from work and his girlfriend was staying there while he was gone. Claims that the stove burner kept lighting itself. She'd walk into the kitchen and it would be lit. She turned it off and shortly later it would be lit again. Then, one night, my brother woke up in the middle of the night and sees his girlfriend sitting at the end of the bed. Not just sees, but feels her near his feet. Staring at him, he calls out for her to come back to bed. She doesn't respond, so he calls out louder, telling her to come back to bed and asking her what's wrong. His girlfriend then asks what he's doing. He turns, he turns, and she wait. He turns, and she's sleeping next to him. He turns back, no one at the end of the bed. Now he's freaked out, but doesn't want to scare his girlfriend from coming over his place. A few nights later, they're both sleeping, and he wakes up to his girlfriend screaming. He looks over, and she's sleeping, but thrashing around, holding onto her neck. He doesn't see anything, so he started yelling and shaking her to wake up. After a few shakes, she wakes up crying and terrified. She starts telling my brother about how real her dream felt, that a woman was strangling her, telling her to get out, that she doesn't belong there and to leave her man alone. Her neck had red marks on it, possibly from herself trying to defend herself, but they believe to be it from something else. My brother then comes clean to her. He decides, they decide to do some research and found out that the address that they lived in was an old brothel back in the day that the rich bathers used to stay in. My brother lived in the house for a few more weeks before he could locate a new place. She never came back to stay the night, though, and he never experienced anything aggressive while there. Still kind of messed up, though. I know my brother and I can't tell why he's lying. This crap was legit, and when she talked about it, you could see how shaken she was. She found creepy pictures of her own cell phone on her own cell phone. The story of a kid who borrowed his mom's phone to play with and ended up falling asleep in bed. Mom finds the kid sleeping, grabs her phone and looks at her phone's pics to see a picture of this crazy half face close up and the kid sleeping in the background. We've already read that, but that was just like a shorter version of what we read, so might as well throw that one in. My dead grandfathers played with my baby. My daughter was born with mild tracheomalacia, soft windpipe. The only trouble it had ever caused was that she would make a whistling sound sometimes when she was breathing, especially when she was excited or upset. Fast forward to when she was about 4 months old and fast asleep in her crib. One evening, her older brother had a stomach flu that day, and he had been throwing up. We thought the baby hadn't caught it, but a little while after we put her to bed, we suddenly heard her softly sputtering in the monitor. Then silence for a few seconds. Then a huge, loud wail, which made both my husband and I run even faster to her room. By the time we got to her, she had fallen eerily quiet again. We saw she was gaping for air, choking, unable to clear the vomit from her throat, or get a clean breath. After we picked her up and cleaned her mouth, she continued to gasp, turning blue, then gray, as I drove her quickly to the ER. She had partially recovered by the time we got there. They gave her O2 chest x-rays, then a clean bill, and we left. Fast forward about 2 hours later, when I'm back in my bedroom with her sleeping upright in the baby seat next to me in bed, my husband and I talked briefly about what would happen if what would have happened if the baby had not cried out so loudly. Wouldn't we have reacted so quickly? Would she have recovered? I am in out of sleep myself because I kept checking her. One of the times before I had fully awoken, I looked at the hallway and saw my grandfather, who had passed away a few years prior. When he was alive, he was not the most involved granddad, but when he met my husband, my boyfriend at the time, they had an instant connection. When he passed away, his last coherent words were, I'm not going to make it to Altruitis and Mr. Altruitis' wedding, am I? He loved my husband dearly. Anyway, I see him out in the hallway this night. He's just standing there in khakis and a polo on his hand. With the polo with his hand in his pockets, okay? In my dream state, I see my children, except the baby, pulling at his arms and playing with him. He had a simple smile on his face. He looks over towards the baby's room and back to me and says, I'm sorry I made her cry, but I'm glad she's okay. The television turned off when he entered the room. My friend told me a story his dad told him. Every day he would have come from school and he would be the first one there for at least about 2 hours or so. One day he walked in front of the door and the TV was on and instantly turned off. He stood in the doorway for a second, turned around and walked away. He didn't go back into the house until his parents came back. Okay, we're skipping number 27 because again, we've read this one already a couple days ago, so we're not going to read that one. We're going to go straight to 28, and this one's called He Felt a Ghost in His Bed. I don't remember all of the details because my dad told me this story several years ago, but here it goes. When my dad was younger and still living in Poland, he and a few friends took a trip and one night decided to stay at a bed and breakfast type place. Everything seemed normal until he suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. He told me that he felt some sort of a presence behind him, so he slowly turned around, but there was no one there. He swears he could feel someone there on the bed with him, though, along with the slight shift in pressure on the bed. It went away after a few minutes, and my dad went back to sleep. The next morning, he found out that a man had died in the bed about a week or so prior. The window opened on its own. I was in junior college and was living on a dorm which had a reputation for being haunted. Of course, the RAs spreading this around, and we had fun time scaring ourselves the first month or so of school. The floor, which had the greatest reputation for being haunted, were the second and fifth floors. My room was on the fifth. I lived in an international floor, even though I myself not was not in international. So my roommate was from Tokyo in the dorm. Okay, it's Tokyo. In the dorm, each of the floor alternated a single bathroom and a double seat. Three people would share a bathroom. This setup was called the suite. And the person who lived in the single or double, if you were in the single, was your suite mate. My suite mate was from Cairo. Really fun ladies. Right? It was a great year. That'll get that one. Okay. So I come home at about midnight after a long night of chatting online, and my roommate was in the curtain shut between our halves of the rooms. She hears me walk in and says, "Oh, my name? I'm so glad." Okay. Oh, my name. Oh, I guess they're trying to put like another name, so we'll pull her name. "Oh, Shiaki, I'm so glad you're here." While I was in the bathroom, the door opened by itself. Now I enjoy a mystery as much as anyone else, but I like to be practical about things. So naturally, I think there is a rational explanation. I walk into the bathroom. The curtain over the bathroom was drawn closed, so I peeked under it. Sure enough, the window was open about an inch. I figured it must be a draft. I walk back into the room and tell my roommate, "Well, the window's open about an inch, so it probably just blew the door open." My roommate's greatly relieved and says something to the effect of, "Oof, I'm glad to hear that." Total time transpired about 20 seconds later. I turn around and go back to the bathroom, so I take out my contacts and brush my teeth and stop dead in my tracks. The curtain, which had previously been closed, was now open, but it wasn't drawn open like someone would see out the window, but rolled to each side, like one would roll up a newspaper, just as if someone had been sitting in the window. I looked at it for about 30 seconds, turned out the lights, walked back out, went to bed, and contacts and all. All right. The next morning, it took me a few minutes to unroll each curtain and flatten it out so it would lay flat again. I saw a black shadow from my car. I was on a college ghost hunt with a guy named Chris Fleming. Cool dude. We did all the normal college ghost hunt stuff, walking to supposedly haunted dorms and experiencing some cool stuff, but nothing crazy. The city we were in had this special place called the Ghost Trestle. Trestle. It was basically basically a railway bridge in the middle of a cornfield that had dirt road underneath it. Anyway, anyways, during this ghost hunt with this guy who was actually featured in Ghost Adventures, we told him about the place. He was pumped and rushed through the rest of the college ghost hunt. Him and his assistant and a few of my friends took two cars with all his equipment and the ghost trestle. That's a weird word. when when we got there, our train was coming, so he interviewed us on camera and telling the story about this place. The story was, back a long time ago, there was a farmhouse still there, but rebuilt, and a farmer, his wife and son escaped the fire in the house. Also on fire. Okay, also on fire was a horse stable. The farmer ran to try and rescue the horses before they succumbed to the fire, while the wife and son went to wave down a train that passed by. The story ends with the farmer dying and the stable on fire. The story ends with the farmer dying in the stable fire, and his wife and children were waving down the train when they were struck and killed. Okay, To this day, if you park your car underneath a bridge while train crosses you above, it's supposed to open in another dimension world to be able to communicate with them. Well, we showed up, of course. To our luck, there was a train coming. We all freaked out and all got pumped. We all got pumped while the medium Chris Flemings attempted to communicate. We were all talking, taking pictures, and began to experience with weird technological failures. My camera, which was my own, began flashing and taking multiple pictures. Same thing was occurring with our disposable camera Chris Fleming's assistant had. At one point, we began to see stuff mostly out of the corner of our eyes, and Chris attempted to communicate, but whatever spirit was there seemed to be more intimidated. Chris believed it was the spirit of the little boy. He would he would every now and then see a figure poking its head out from behind a concrete wall under the track. It seemed like it was playing hide and seek. I can honestly say that I was young and thought this stuff was a hoax and just for fun for college kids to pretend until this night when we had a real professional experience the same thing we all did. Fast forward to 2 years or two after a year or two after this event, I came to the same place for the first time since that night. We went with Chris Flemings again. This time it was just me and my girlfriend. Me and my then girlfriend. Oh, okay. I parked under the bridge, turned off the car lights, and it took the key out of the ignition. We were joking together about how we were getting too old for this stuff. And when I looked out the rear view mirror, I saw a black shadow flash by the rear window of my car, followed by some noise that sounded like someone running towards my car. My heart never raced so fast to put my key into the ignition and peel out and get out of there. Whatever it was, it didn't seem like it wanted us there, and I have yet to drive under that bridge ever since. Wow. Okay, that was interesting. That actually took a while longer than I thought it would take because um, some of the stories were actually longer than the other ones that we read. But you know what? I want to take a little break by telling you guys thank you guys for coming. I do appreciate it. Episode 7, around the campfire. It's pretty cool. Uh, and yeah, I really appreciate you guys staying here. Sitting with me, hearing my stories, and being a part of this uh, little ritual, I guess you can say, right, for every year on October. But yeah, it's always fun to do this. Reading ghost stories or reading scary stories or reading the stories that you guys want me to read to y'all. It's pretty amazing, of course. But yeah, if you're playing with your phone while driving, I'll tell you what, you can stop that right now. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you don't need that. You don't need that. You know what I mean? You're driving. Pay attention to the road. Don't play with your phones. Period. Right? Listen, put your phone away. Put your phone in your pocket. Give your phone to your mums, your dads, your friends, brothers, sisters, cousins, whatever. Whoever's in the car, just give the phone to them and be like, hey, you know what? If a message comes through, read it to me. Or if a call comes through, put it on speaker. That's simple as that. You don't need to have your phone in your hands, right? You need both hands on your steering wheel unless you're driving a manual. Then I'll forgive you. But other than that, put your phone away, please. All right, moving on. This next story is called Lake Havasu Ghost. A few years back, I was camping in Lake Havasu with my brother and a few friends. My brother and I were working on building a fire, while the other guys were on the boat, mooring it to the shore. We had a hole we dug where we had our previous fires that trip. So my brother got the fire going and sat down around the pit. The fire was burning for a good 10 minutes or so and was a decent size before the most bizarre thing happened. The fire went out, completely extinguished, as in no more flames. The embers were still there emitting heat, but the flame was gone. My brother and I looked at each other, dead back at the fire pit. A few seconds go by, and the fire reignites to a level it was before. It went out. we were all totally confused, and we just started screaming for the guys to come back to check out what happened. The time Grandma came to say goodbye, my paternal grandmother died when I was 6. I lived in New York. She lived in Pennsylvania. I met her maybe twice. I was 6 years old. I was 6 years old, asleep in my bed one night, and for whatever reason, I woke up and walked into my parents' bedroom. My father had an easy chair in one of the corners for reading. I sat in the chair. On the opposite wall was my father's closet. I opened it, and Grandma came out and stood about 6 feet away. I just wanted to say goodbye, she said, smiled, waved, and turned back and walked back into the closet. Closing the door behind her, I went back to my room. About 2 hours later, it was around 6 a.m. The phone rings. It was a call from Pennsylvania that Grandma Catherine had died in her sleep. My mother came to wake me up to tell me, and I said, I know. What do you mean? She came to say goodbye to me last night. She made me repeat the story 3 times and then told me never, ever to tell my father this story. And I never did. You didn't hear that little girl singing? This happened my senior year of college, Christmas break 2006. I worked for for a professor that asked me to house slash dog sit for him while he was out of town to see the bowl game that we were in. He was gone for 3 days and had a huge piece of land in the middle of nowhere. I invited my girlfriend at the time. He had horses and fishing and a gator to ride around on, etc., etc. So the first 2 nights went down with no incidents, but the last night his little foofy dog is having a fit. She keeps barking at the back door. At first, we blew it off, but decided to lock the dog inside in the case of a coyote or something. After a while, we started to get a little creeped out. I kept saying it's probably an animal and we'll be fine. My girlfriend, not too bright, wants to go investigate to see what's outside. So I locked the door behind her. She goes outside and says she saw something small and gray, probably a coyote, and ran off. So just an animal, no worries. But by this time, we're pretty spooked. I just heard footsteps. The dog now starts barking at the window and on the other side of the house. We're still trying to ignore it, but a little worried. We decided to get into bed. Awkward silence, then I hear it. It sounds like a young girl singing a soft, eerie lullaby. I don't say anything, hoping that my mind is playing tricks on me. My girlfriend says, let's get the hell out of here. I say, but why? She says, you don't hear the little girl singing? Okay, let's get out of here. We got out. I even called someone to talk to me while we walked out to my car. Next morning, we went to clean up the house and such. The most scared I've ever been, ever. Get out. So this happened last summer, 2 summers ago now. We have an old Mercury Grand Marquis that my dad had wanted to buy for years. The owner would never sell it, even though it was just left there sitting there, you know. After he died, his daughter sold it to us for pretty cheap, because she knew how bad my dad wanted it. So one day I had drove it to my friend's house on a rainy day to play some Smash Brothers. I left at about 10 at night, and it had stopped raining, and I had to drive my friend home. So this car's radio didn't work, and it would only be static if it was on. Well, I turned down my friend's phone, and when I turned, I heard someone say, "Get out." I know it wasn't my friend because he was talking to me. So we continued the conversation, and I got to his house about 5 minutes later. When we got there, I asked him if he heard something weird when we turned into the road. He said he heard the exact same thing I did, and I was freaked out. The sound, it sounds like such a made up story, but I really wish it was. Safe to say, I haven't driven that car ever since. I forgot to tell you about George. I worked the graveyard shift in a hospital kitchen about 5 years ago before the kitchen was renovated a few years prior. Our dish room was used to be part of the morgue. While I was training, I frequently feel like someone was watching me, especially when I crossed into the part of the hallway. Every time I went to the dish room, something would move, turned over, or missing. Assuming it was my coworkers, I didn't think anything of it. About a week later, my coworker leaves, and I'm left on my own. Every night, every night I would hear carts being moved around, dishes being put away, and silverware rattling. If I would leave for a minute, I get back on, and my radio would be switched to a different station. It got to the point where I was terrified to come to work every night. I called my old coworker, told her told her what was going on, and she very calmly said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you about George." Apparently, George was a nurse, medical examiner who had a stroke and died while at work. He was on his 50s. I was told from then on everything actually went quite well. I introduced myself to George, asked him to please keep it down, and as long as I said hi to him as soon as I started work, he didn't seem to want to bother me anymore. It took us a little while to find a radio station we could agree on, but we worked harmoniously after that. When I left the job a year later, I made sure I told the girl that replaced me. Let's sing happy birthday to the ghost. We moved into a new house a few months ago. As we were as we were in the process of purchasing the house, the renter who was living in it died unexpectedly of natural causes in his mid 40s. He died right in the middle of the living room. Shortly after, we moved to the house, and almost immediately, our 2-year-old daughter started talking to the ghost that lived in our home. Now, let's be real. She's two, and she's 2 and 2 years old. She's 2 and 2 years old are very impressionable. Halloween had recently passed, and she had this Halloween theme pictured, but that she loved to read. Oh my God, these stories. I do apologize. So it's entirely impossible that all this talk of ghosts was just coming from looking through the book on a regular basis. Still, this was always telling me that the ghost was in the playhouse in the basement, or that the ghost was in the stairs, or that the ghost was standing in the corner. She never seemed to be afraid of the ghost and considered him to be a friend. So I wasn't at all concerned, even if there were really ghosts haunting my home. If he's a nice and helpful ghost, it could certainly be a lot worse. I would often tell the ghost that he was welcome to stay if he wanted, but he was also welcome to go if that would make him happier. I was about 30-70. I was about 30-70 on the ghost being real, and she could see and talk to him, versus the ghost being just her imagination fueled by her Halloween book. Until one day, when we were going out to the car to go to a daycare in the morning, it was still dark and raining. My daughter told me that the ghost was on the back deck, and then she told me that today was the ghost's birthday and wanted to sing him happy birthday once again. I mostly disagreed what she was saying, as she is birthday obsessed and was in the past made us using happy birthday to Mickey Mouse. What? A bowl of fruit snacks and the bathroom. Okay. So we sang and wished the ghost happy birthday and went with our lives. Later that day, out of pure curiosity, I looked up the obituary of the man who had died in a home. He and wouldn't you know it, it was his birthday. This demon lady literally got inches from my face. Know how know how when you die you see a white light, and some report the lady or whatever that guides you through. So I'm lying in bed awake, heart racing, died in a dream, and I woke up, except I can't move. My body's frozen. I see at the foot of my bed almost demon-like lady with a white dress walking towards me. I thought, well, I'm dead. Must have been a heart attack in my sleep. This demon lady literally got inches from my face. Then I could move, and it was all over. The disembodied head of a woman floating above my bed at night. Living in this dark, creepy-ish rental home from the 4th through the 7th grade, I don't know if the house was actually haunted or not, but my mom and sister and me always got these creepy feelings in various areas of the house, particularly the closet and the bathroom in the master's bedroom. Anyway, my sister was a little bit younger than me when hold up. Anyways, my sister, who was a little younger than me, would tell me about how she saw at the disembodied head of a woman floating above my bed at night, looking at me sleep. I admit, at night I would get the eerie feeling that someone I couldn't see was watching me, but trying to be the tough 9-year-old, I brushed it off and was saying, as the rambling of a 7-year-old. Nothing really happened for months, and I even forgot what my sister said about the disembodied head until one night I was in a particular deep sleep when I suddenly heard the blood-curdling scream of a woman right outside my ear. At first, I thought it was my mom or sister messing with me, but then when I glanced across the room, I saw my sister sleeping in bed, and went to my mom's room and saw her sleeping in hers. There was no other woman in the house that I could have possibly done it. I'll never forget the sound of that lock turning by itself. This is a brief account of an experience I had almost a year ago in the warehouse I worked alone. No one I've told has believed me, but perhaps you will. I worked in a warehouse that my father purchased. He bought it for 25% of the cost from a farmer who seemed very excited to get rid of it. It was in the middle of, I don't know, I'm not even going to pronounce that, country with no neighbors for a half a mile around. Look at the window, you see cornfields and scraggly trees. Call service? Forget about it. Forget about it. I work here alone, painting and preparing the front office portion for eventual functionality. To get into the front office, you must go through the hallway from the main house into a secondary office, then through another door in the front. I frequently heard bumps and thuds, and occasionally will go into the warehouse and feel air movements, but I've always attributed it to draft and the animal life in the roof. The only thing that has ever made me uneasy about the building is the fact that all of the doors locked are reversed. Whoever installed these locks didn't intend to keep people out. They intended to keep something in. I was at the front office when I began to hear the thudding. I ignored it and continued to apply masking tape in the door. I was working on it, but this time it was accompanied by a screeching sound. Not loud, but audible. I was freaked out, but convinced myself that it was just a pissed off raccoon or squirrel that had found its way inside. I continued working until I heard the slam. Okay, the door to the secondary office had been opened. It sounded like it had a violent slam shut. I peeked around the corner and saw that I was right. The secondary door was not closed. I tried to logic it out in my head that a strong draft had sucked it closed, though I knew there was no such draft. The thudding began again, closed this time. I've never been able to put a proximity on it, but now it sounded like I was right on the other side of the door. I froze, unsure of what was happening. My eyes locked to the door handle, which began to turn. The door disengaged its latch and slowly swung open, wider and wider. Nothing there. Nothing visible. No air movements, just quiet. So quiet. A quiet that seemed to overwhelm me with its presence. A quiet so thick I couldn't breathe. The quiet was shattered when the screeching came again. This time, it was clearly human. Pained, angered and emanating from the main house. The door slammed. The door slammed. That entirely broke my frozen, fearful state. I ran. I got into my car and drove until I was in cell range and to call my father, but he didn't believe anything about the doors closing, but agreed that the building had something weird about it. He told me he'd be right out. Fast forward to half an hour later, my dad and I met up and drove back to the warehouse. I showed him the door that slammed, showing him that it was separated from both the front office and the main warehouse, so no draft could have closed it. I told him about the thuds and screechings and sudden quiet that overcame the building. He decided that he would check the main warehouse. Emboldened by his presence, I led away. Something you should know about this warehouse: it was formerly a furniture manufacturer place owned by a farmer. They made handmade chairs, tables, etc. Because of all the cutting that went on the floor, it thickly coated with dust. That we walked into the warehouse and saw nothing out of the ordinary. The dust was untouched, and the doors were closed. Windows were locked, and the thing out of the ordinary was that one of the hanging fluorescent light fixtures, it was hanging askew and swaying lightly, insisting we took a look around the mount to make sure it didn't just break loose. My dad grabbed a step ladder and he supported it while I climbed and grabbed the swinging light. I looked at the top light and saw a handprint, single, fresh, inhumanly large handprint, no footprints in the dust around the light, so no signs of a presence. I climbed down and switched places with my father. He saw it and said, "What the hell? There has been no one in here for years." He climbed down and told me he'd be suspicious of someone breaking in and stealing parts of the warehouse light system. He couldn't believe me that it wasn't human, that something wasn't right. The last thing he said was, "Nothing is here. Next time, just go back to work." And then, as if to show it presence, the thud returned. This time, it wasn't just a thud, but more of an earthquake. The entire building felt like it moved. The heartbeat-like thud was then overlaid by the screeching, the awful, awful screech. It felt like I was coming from the. It was felt like it was coming from the walls. Someone, the walls themselves. We ran, and I haven't returned. My father hired someone to finish the job, and has since moved into the office. He has heard the thudding, but thus far nothing has happened further than actually happening. I don't know, nor do I even care. Don't even care now. What I do know is that there is something paranormal in that building, and the man who sold it to us knew. I'll never forget the sound of the log turning by itself, or the feeling of deafening silence. Wow. Well, that was pretty much. That was it. That was it. These were great stories, like I said, we did skip one, and yeah, because we've already read it. So thank you guys for coming. I really do appreciate it. If you guys want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, do so. The links will be in the description below. Any stories that you guys want to share with me, post them on Twitter or post them on the comments down below, and I'll read them and give credit where credit is due. I think I will be continuing with this website for a couple more days, because the stories in here are pretty good. They do lack some kind of grammatical correction, but they're all right. They're all right. And yeah, maybe towards the end we'll start reading like creepypastas. You know what I mean? Because I do enjoy a good creepypasta. And yeah, so thank you guys for coming. I really do appreciate it. And so, when dust settles in and the moon begins to quail the sun, remember to always look behind you. Until the next one. Peace out, everybody.